These are 20 Oscar wins that sparked outrage, rewrote careers, and in some cases, permanently stained the most prestigious night in Hollywood. Some of these performers were genuinely talented, some were not the best choice in their year, and some won under circumstances so controversial, so politically charged, or so personally scandalous that the Academy itself has never fully recovered from the decision. Al Pacino, Scent of a Woman. This is the most textbook example of what insiders call a make-up Oscar, a win given not for the best performance of the year, but to compensate for years of being passed over. By 1993, Al Pacino had been nominated 7 times without winning, and that losing streak had become Hollywood's most painful running joke because the performances he lost for were not forgettable films. He lost for The Godfather, for Serpico, for The Godfather Part 2, for Dog Day Afternoon, for And Justice for All, for Dick Tracy, and for Glengarry Glen Ross. That is a greatest hits album of American cinema, and he had nothing to show for it at the Oscars. At the 65th ceremony, Pacino was actually nominated twice in the same night, Best Actor for Scent of a Woman and Best Supporting Actor for Glengarry Glen Ross, which brought his total to 0 for 7 before anyone had opened a single envelope. The overdue narrative was overwhelming and essentially unstoppable. The problem was that the man who deserved to win that year was Denzel Washington for Malcolm X, and not by a small margin. Washington's portrayal captured the full arc from petty criminal to Nation of Islam, minister to global human rights icon, and it is widely considered one of the greatest screen performances in American cinema history. He won the New York Film Critics Award and the Boston Film Critics Award, and decades later, Spike Lee said plainly at a 2025 Cannes press conference, "No disrespect to my brother Al Pacino, but Denzel should have won. What he did with that film was amazing." What makes this story stranger is that Washington himself did not want to win that year. He later said, "When Pacino won for Scent of a Woman, I was up for Malcolm X. I didn't want to win that time. I would have felt badly. It was Pacino's time." The Academy gave the right person the wrong award in the wrong year, and in doing so, denied one of cinema's most deserving performances its proper recognition. Ariana DeBose, West Side Story. Ariana DeBose became the second actress in Oscar history to win for playing the exact same character in the exact same musical, 60 years apart. She won Best Supporting Actress for playing Anita in Steven Spielberg's 2021 remake of West Side Story, and Rita Moreno had won the identical award for the identical role back in 1962. The National Hispanic Media Coalition's president, Brenda Victoria Castillo, responded pointedly, "Our community deserves recognition for all its creative contributions, not just honored for the same role 60 years later." And that was only one layer of the controversy. The film itself became a catastrophic commercial failure, opening to just $10.5 million against a $100 million budget and ultimately grossing only $76 million worldwide, a film that needed roughly $300 million to break even. Lead actor Ansel Elgort's sexual assault accusations hung over the entire production before it ever reached theaters, and critics questioned openly whether the remake needed to exist at all. Slate's Odie Henderson asked in his review, "Who is this for? It's a dusty, outdated, racist musical." DeBose addressed the identity-based backlash directly in Elle magazine. "There have been insinuations that I was given an Oscar because I'm queer and because I am an Afro-Latina. And that's haterade." Her win was not an upset. She swept every major precursor, including BAFTA, SAG, the Golden Globe, and Critics' Choice. And Rolling Stone's David Fear described her as a strong contender for Most Valuable Player, whose energy could power a metropolitan block. The performance itself was universally praised. The grace note of the evening carried genuine feeling. Rita Moreno had executive produced the remake and sat in the audience that night, having deliberately avoided coaching DeBose through the process, telling the New York Times, "I knew what a delicate position Ariana was in. I wanted her to be absolutely sure that I didn't impose anything on her." DeBose paid tribute from the stage. Her subsequent film choices, Argylle, Kraven the Hunter, and Wish, were all critically panned, and that trajectory has fueled retroactive questions about whether the win was more about the moment than sustained excellence. Art Carney, Harry, and Tonto, the most shocking Best Actor result in the history of the Academy Awards, happened when Art Carney, a television actor best known for playing Ed Norton on The Honeymooners, defeated what may be the single greatest Best Actor lineup ever assembled in one room. The nominees that year were Al Pacino for The Godfather Part 2, Jack Nicholson for Chinatown, Dustin Hoffman for Lenny, and Albert Finney for Murder on the Orient Express. Both Chinatown and The Godfather Part 2 appear on the AFI Top 100 Films list. Harry and Tonto has never been released on Blu-ray in the United States, and is largely forgotten outside of film history discussions about this exact ceremony. Nicholson had swept the Golden Globe, the BAFTA, the New York Film Critics, and the National Society of Film Critics, making him the clear frontrunner going into the night. The most credible explanation for what followed is vote splitting. When The Godfather Part 2 arrived as a late-season juggernaut, voters who admired both Nicholson and Pacino may have been unable to choose between them in the final stretch, and that paralysis allowed Carney to come through the middle and take the award.
The winner is Art Carney in...
A detail that confirms how unexpected the outcome was. Only Nicholson and Carney actually showed up to the ceremony, while Pacino, Hoffman, and Finney apparently had not believed they had a realistic chance of winning, which means nobody in the room that night thought the evening would end the way it did. The Academy was clearly treating this as their one and only opportunity to honor a 5-time Emmy winner with no film pedigree, and the thinking was simple: there would not be another chance. And there was not, because Carney never received another Oscar nomination. Meanwhile, Nicholson won Best Actor the very next year for One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Pacino waited until 1993, winning for Scent of a Woman, which opened this list. Casey Affleck, Manchester by the Sea. Casey Affleck's win for Manchester by the Sea is one of the most difficult entries on this list, not because the performance was undeserving, but because of what surrounded it. Back in 2010, 2 women who worked on Affleck's mockumentary I'm Still Here filed civil lawsuits containing deeply serious allegations. Producer Amanda White alleged numerous uninvited and unwelcome sexual advances, that Affleck ordered a crew member to expose himself to her, and that he grabbed her arm violently. Cinematographer Magdalena Gorka alleged that Affleck crawled into her bed while she was sleeping, his breath reeking of alcohol, and she described her treatment as the most traumatizing of her career. Affleck denied the allegations and settled both cases out of court for undisclosed amounts. Affleck won in February of 2017, and the Harvey Weinstein exposés broke in October of 2017, just 7 months later. The allegations had been, as the Daily Beast reported, almost completely sidestepped during awards season. Actress Constance Wu was among the most vocal public critics, writing, "He's running for an award that honors a craft whose purpose is examining the dignity of the human experience, and young women are deeply human." She added, "I've been counseled not to talk about this for career's sake. F my career then. I'm a woman and human first." The defining image of that night was Brie Larson's face. Required by tradition to present Best Actor as the previous year's Best Actress winner, Larson had won for playing a kidnapping and sexual assault survivor in Room and was a vocal advocate for survivors. She handed Affleck the statuette, but refused to clap, standing with her arms at her sides, and she later told Vanity Fair, "I think whatever it was that I did on stage kind of spoke for itself." Affleck later admitted he had contributed to an unprofessional environment on set and wished he had not. He effectively disappeared from Hollywood in the years that followed. Cher, Moonstruck. Cher's Best Actress win for Moonstruck is one of those cases where the performer's off-screen persona created controversy that had very little to do with what actually appeared on screen. By 1988, the Academy establishment did not view Cher as a serious actress. She was a tabloid fixture, a pop star, a television personality known for outrageous Bob Mackie outfits and younger boyfriends, and she described the situation plainly herself. "I thought they hated the way I dressed, and I had young boyfriends, and they just thought I wasn't serious." The most commonly cited should have won is Glenn Close for Fatal Attraction. Close delivered one of the most culturally lasting performances of the decade as Alex Forrest, and this was her 4th consecutive nomination. One analysis put it directly: the best argument for why Glenn Close should have won is that Close could have starred in Moonstruck, but Cher couldn't have starred in Fatal Attraction. But Fatal Attraction lost all 6 of its nominated categories because the erotic thriller genre was considered too salacious for the Academy's taste. What the controversy tends to overlook is that Cher had built genuine film credentials. She had studied at Lee Strasberg's Actors Studio, earned an Oscar nomination for Silkwood, and won Best Actress at Cannes for Mask, only to be snubbed when the Academy failed to nominate her. That Cannes snub produced one of the most famous moments in Oscar fashion history. At the 1986 ceremony, she wore a barely there black sequined ensemble with a feather mohawk headdress designed by Bob Mackie, which she described in the 2024 documentary Bob Mackie, Naked Illusion, as her way of saying "F you" to the Academy. When presenting that night, she told the crowd, "As you can see, I got my handbook on how to dress like a serious actress." Moonstruck holds a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes. Roger Ebert added it to his Great Movies list, and Billboard ranked her performance as the greatest acting performance by a musician of all time. Gwyneth Paltrow, Shakespeare in Love. Gwyneth Paltrow's Best Actress win for Shakespeare in Love stands as the clearest case study in Academy history of what happens when an aggressive campaign replaces artistic merit. And the man behind it was Harvey Weinstein. His push for Shakespeare in Love fundamentally reinvented Oscar campaigning, and most observers agree, not for the better. Miramax deployed an estimated $15 million war chest, though Weinstein himself claimed far less. The studio hired its first-ever dedicated in-house Oscar publicist. Producer Donna Gigliotti personally wrote 300 invitations to Academy members for film premieres, and Academy voters were bombarded with VHS screeners in violation of a 1997 Academy rule. Most notoriously, Weinstein hired publicists to spread a whisper campaign against Saving Private Ryan, pushing the narrative that the only thing amazing about Ryan is the first 20 minutes. DreamWorks publicist Terry Press later confirmed it. I started to get all these calls from press saying Harvey Weinstein has hired publicists and they're trying to get us to write stories saying that the only thing amazing about Ryan is the first 20 minutes. Weinstein also recruited First Lady Hillary Clinton to host the film's New York premiere, and Spielberg's response was restrained. I do not want you to get down in the mud with Harvey. The near-universal should have won is Cate Blanchett for Elizabeth. Paltrow's tearful acceptance speech became a lightning rod.
In this auditorium, let alone up here, if it wasn't for two incredibly talented.
She broke down thanking her family and opened with, I don't feel very deserving of this in your presence. Shakespeare in Love then beat Saving Private Ryan for Best Picture, despite Spielberg winning Best Director, and Harrison Ford was chosen to present Best Picture, presumed by many to signal his friend Spielberg's victory. Weinstein later recalled, they had Harrison Ford up there announcing the award. Was that a symbol it was supposed to go the other way? Ford looked visibly stricken reading the winner aloud. In 2015, a majority of Academy voters re-polled on that Best Picture race chose Saving Private Ryan by a wide margin. And Paltrow said on a 2025 podcast that it took her 25 years to come to terms with everything. Holly Hunter, the piano. Holly Hunter's win for the piano is remembered today primarily for who it denied a historic milestone, and the woman denied was Angela Bassett. Bassett delivered a physically and emotionally demanding performance as Tina Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It, learning Turner's dance moves, performing her own stunts, and winning the Golden Globe in the musical comedy category, along with the NAACP Image Award. Had she won, Bassett would have been the first black woman to win Best Actress in the history of the Academy Awards. That honor did not arrive until Halle Berry, 8 years later, in 2001. Bassett has never hidden how she feels about the loss. When a fan comment on Watch What Happens Live suggested she should have won, her response came simply, yeah, me too. She later added, I didn't think that was a gift. I thought it was a given. 30 years passed before she finally received an honorary Oscar at the 2024 Governors Awards. Hunter's performance in the piano carried genuine merit. A Palme d'Or winner at Cannes, Hunter dominated the precursor awards, taking the BAFTA and the Golden Globe for drama, and she accomplished something rare by earning a simultaneous nomination for Best Supporting Actress for The Firm the same night, making her a double nominee. The character Ada McGrath communicates entirely through gestures, facial expressions, and sign language, a largely silent performance that divided audiences. The other nominees were Stockard Channing, Emma Thompson, and Deborah Winger. The Bassett loss is now routinely cited alongside Denzel Washington's loss for Malcolm X as direct evidence of the Academy's racial blind spots during this era. Two of the greatest performances of the decade, delivered by two black actors, lost to white performers in consecutive years, and that is not a coincidence. Jack Palance, City Slickers. Jack Palance's win for City Slickers is the most memorable acceptance speech in Oscar history for reasons that had almost nothing to do with the film he was being honored for.
Like, for instance, you go out there and you do these.
72 years old at the time, Palance was collecting a win for a brief comedic role as the grizzled trail boss Curly in a mainstream summer comedy, having last been nominated for Sudden Fear in 1952 and Shane in 1953, nearly 40 years earlier. The Academy was clearly rewarding his career, not this specific performance. City Slickers received no other nominations, and that detail tells you everything. When Palance reached the podium, he looked down at 5'7" host Billy Crystal, Palance standing 6'4", and opened with a line borrowed from the film.
Billy Crystal. God, I crap bigger than him.
He addressed Hollywood's fear of hiring elderly actors, dropped to the stage floor, and executed several one-armed push-ups in his tuxedo. Later telling reporters, I didn't know what the hell else to do. Crystal milked the moment brilliantly throughout the rest of the ceremony, delivering lines like, Jack Palance is backstage on the Stairmaster, and Jack Palance just bungee jumped off the Hollywood sign. The following year's telecast opened with Palance dragging a giant statuette on stage, while Crystal rode on top. The nominees Palance defeated were Tommy Lee Jones for JFK, Ben Kingsley for Bugsy, and Michael Lerner for Barton Fink. The two Bugsy nominations almost certainly split votes between Keitel and Kingsley, and the ceremony was dominated by the Silence of the Lambs, sweeping the Big Five, which may have redirected sympathy votes toward a beloved veteran in a weaker supporting field. The push-ups are now arguably more famous than anything Palance ever did on screen, which is either the best or the worst argument for giving him the award. Jamie Lee Curtis. Everything Everywhere All at Once. Jamie Lee Curtis's win managed to enrage two entirely separate fanbases simultaneously, which, as a feat of controversy, is actually somewhat impressive. Curtis won Best Supporting Actress for playing IRS Inspector Deirdre Beaubairdre in Everything Everywhere All at Once with only 17 minutes of screen time, defeating her own co-star Stephanie Hsu, the frontrunner Angela Bassett, from Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, Hong Chow, and Carrie Condon. The frustration over Stephanie Hsu was immediate. Hsu's role as Joy Wang, and her alter ego Jobu Tupaki, was meatier, more central to the plot, and more emotionally demanding than what Curtis had on screen, and many felt Curtis was not even the best supporting actress in her own film. One viral post captured the mood exactly. Jamie Lee Curtis wasn't the best supporting actress in the movie she was in. How did she beat her co-star and Angela? None of that matched what happened when Curtis's name was announced. Cameras captured Angela Bassett's expression, freezing, composed, but visibly devastated, and she did not stand or clap. The moment went instantly viral, and Bassett later told Oprah she was gobsmacked, adding in a 2025 Town & Country cover story, "I found it interesting. Interesting that I wouldn't be allowed to be disappointed at an outcome where I thought I was deserving. I didn't think that was a gift. I thought it was a given." Michael B. Jordan and Jonathan Majors gave her a shout-out from the stage.
Hey, Auntie, we love you.
Curtis's speech then landed at the absolute peak of the Nepo baby cultural moment, with New York Magazine's viral cover on the topic having run just months earlier, and she told the crowd,
"My mother and my father were both nominated for Oscars in different categories. I just won an Oscar."
A white actress with Hollywood legacy on both sides of her family tree, winning over 3 women of color from a film centering Asian experiences, and the optics were difficult to defend. Bassett received an honorary Oscar the following year. Jennifer Hudson, Dreamgirls. Jennifer Hudson's win is unique on this list because the performance itself was never the controversy. It was everything that surrounded it. Hudson had been famously eliminated in 7th place on American Idol Season 3 in 2004, with many viewers at the time believing racial bias played a role in her elimination. Her path from reality television to Oscar winner in under 3 years was an extraordinary underdog story, and the performance in Dreamgirls was genuinely celebrated. She swept every major precursor, beat 782 hopefuls for the role, and the New York Observer described her show-stopping number as 5 mellifluous, molto vibrato minutes of brilliance. The real scandal was what unfolded behind the scenes with Beyoncé. DreamWorks positioned Beyoncé as the sole Best Actress contender and placed Hudson in the supporting category, despite the roles being arguably comparable in size. And this decision eerily mirrored the film's own plot, in which Effie is pushed aside for the more commercially marketable Dina. Reports emerged that Beyoncé's parents, Matthew and Tina Knowles, argued with director Bill Condon to recut the film to include more Beyoncé and less Hudson, and Condon refused. Matthew Knowles also reportedly attempted to sign Hudson as a management client, was turned down, and then went around telling people he represented her anyway. Beyoncé received 0 acting nominations. Dreamgirls also became the first film in Academy history to receive the most nominations, 8 total, yet failed to receive a Best Picture or Best Director nomination. Eddie Murphy, widely considered a lock for Best Supporting Actor, lost to Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine in what was considered a genuine upset, adding further sting to a night that had promised more. Hudson later achieved EGOT status in 2022, but the evening that was supposed to celebrate Dreamgirls became a study in behind-the-scenes chaos that the film's own story had essentially predicted. Julia Roberts, Erin Brockovich. Julia Roberts' Oscar win for Erin Brockovich is the entry on this list that has aged most gently, which is another way of saying the controversy was always somewhat thin. Roberts swept every major precursor, the BAFTA, the Golden Globe, the SAG, and the Critics' Choice, and she was the overwhelming frontrunner from the start of the season. The real argument was never about whether she would win, it was about whether she should. The central grievance belongs to Ellen Burstyn for Requiem for a Dream. Burstyn's portrayal of Sarah Goldfarb, a lonely widow descending into amphetamine addiction, has grown in stature every year since 2001 and is now considered one of the finest screen performances of its era. It earned her the film's sole nomination. The Academy found Requiem for a Dream too dark, too disturbing, and too unsparing for its comfort, and critics argued that Roberts was essentially playing a version of her own familiar screen persona, brash, charming, outspoken, rather than genuinely disappearing into a character. The playing herself criticism followed the win for years. Director Steven Soderbergh was nominated for Best Director twice that same year for both Erin Brockovich and Traffic, and he won for Traffic. A detail many read as the Academy quietly acknowledging the superior film, while separately handing Roberts the star prize she had long been due. Roberts's acceptance speech became legendary for entirely different reasons. Running approximately 4 minutes, well over the 45-second limit, she quipped at the orchestra conductor who stood to play her off.
And sir, you're doing a great job, but you're so quick with that stick, so why don't you sit, because I may never be here again.
She called out, "Stickman, I see you." She thanked 26 people by name and concluded,
I love the world, I'm so happy, thank you.
She forgot to thank the real Erin Brockovich, who later told Vulture graciously, "I thought nothing of it. This wasn't about me. It was Julia's moment." Kieran Culkin, A Real Pain. Kieran Culkin's win for Best Supporting Actor for A Real Pain is the mildest controversy on this list, and also the most statistically unusual. Culkin swept virtually every precursor: the Golden Globe, Critics' Choice, SAG, BAFTA, Independent Spirit Awards, the New York Film Critics, and the Los Angeles Film Critics. Nobody was surprised by the win. The problem was the category itself. Statistical analysis of the film reveals that Culkin appears in 64.88% of A Real Pain, totaling 58 minutes and 6 seconds of screen time, setting a record for the highest screen time percentage of any Best Supporting Actor winner in Oscar history, and breaking a record held for 50 years by Jack Albertson. For context, Anthony Hopkins won Best Actor for The Silence of the Lambs, with approximately 14% screen time, and Culkin won Best Supporting Actor with nearly 65%. Variety flagged the discrepancy. Backstage wrote that, even the most casual moviegoer would agree that it makes much more sense to classify them as leads, and No Film School observed that Culkin's placement in the supporting category squeezed out actors like Isabella Rossellini in Conclave and Yura Borisov in Anora. His competitors were Yura Borisov, Edward Norton, Guy Pearce, and Jeremy Strong, all legitimate contenders whose claims were undercut by Culkin's quantitative advantage in what was technically a supporting slot. Culkin became the first person since Christopher Plummer in 2012 to win Best Supporting Actor without his film receiving a Best Picture nomination. His acceptance speech was a genuine highlight. He praised co-writer and director Jesse Eisenberg, calling him a genius and promising never to say it to his face. He shouted out Jeremy Strong's work in The Apprentice, and he reminded his wife, Jazz Charton, of her promise to give him a 4th child when you win an Oscar. His brother Macaulay cried watching from home. Kim Basinger, L.A. Confidential. Kim Basinger's Best Supporting Actress win for L.A. Confidential is the clearest example of what the consolation prize looks like in practice. L.A. Confidential was widely considered the superior film to Titanic by critics, and it lost anyway, steamrolled by the blockbuster's momentum at the 70th Academy Awards, where Titanic took 11 wins. L.A. Confidential walked away with 2, Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Supporting Actress, and Basinger's win was effectively the Academy's way of acknowledging a film it had no intention of actually rewarding at the top. The performance drew criticism that has only grown louder over time. One Oscar analyst captured the consensus bluntly: "Can anyone really name one big scene she has where she's really memorable?" The character of Lynn Bracken, a woman surgically altered to resemble Veronica Lake, functions primarily as a love interest archetype, with the film's actual heavy lifting done by Guy Pearce and Russell Crowe. A Gold Derby Forum commenter put it plainly: Kim's win was the Academy's way of honoring the acting ensemble in L.A. Confidential. The should have won is consistently Julianne Moore for Boogie Nights, a raw and complicated portrayal as Amber Waves that has aged brilliantly. Gloria Stewart from Titanic carried enormous sentimental support and would have been the oldest Oscar winner in history at 87 years old. Sigourney Weaver won the BAFTA for The Ice Storm but never received a nomination. Basinger's personal history adds another dimension entirely. Before this win, she had filed for bankruptcy after pulling out of Boxing Helena, resulting in an $8.9 million judgment against her. She had grown estranged from much of her family, and she had developed agoraphobia. 7 Razzie nominations make her Oscar win one of the more unlikely dual history moments in the ceremony's existence. Her acceptance speech thanked only her father and youngest sister, a reflection of family rifts she has never fully addressed publicly. Meryl Streep. The Iron Lady. Meryl Streep knew exactly what the room was thinking when her name was called, and she acknowledged it from the podium immediately. Her opening words paraphrased the collective reaction she imagined crossing the country.
Oh, Oh, no. Oh, come on, why? Her. Again.
This was her third Oscar, on her 17th nomination, ending a 29-year drought since Sophie's Choice, and the discomfort in the room was something even she could not ignore. The Weinstein Company distributed The Iron Lady and aggressively campaigned one specific narrative. Streep had not won in 29 years. The film itself held a 51% on Rotten Tomatoes, with a Metacritic score of 54 out of 100. Critics praised Streep while condemning the film around her, with one review capturing the situation precisely. The Iron Lady is a performance in search of a film. Collider wrote that the role appeared to be the most Oscar-baiting role she has ever taken, almost as if, after 3 decades of losing, Streep finally told her agent, "Get me a role that will win me an Oscar." Former Conservative Party chairman Norman Fowler stated plainly, "She was never, in my experience, the half-hysterical, over-emotional, overacting woman portrayed by Meryl Streep." The film also won Best Makeup, a detail that did little to help critics trying to separate impression from acting. The win's deepest controversy is Viola Davis for The Help. Davis had won the SAG Award and the Critics' Choice, making her the statistical frontrunner going into the ceremony, and she would have been only the second black woman to win Best Actress after Halle Berry. The Academy, instead, chose to reward its most decorated white actress for a third time. The other nominees were Glenn Close in her 6th nomination, without a win, Rooney Mara, and Michelle Williams. Davis eventually won Best Supporting Actress for Fences in 2017, but the 2012 loss remains one of the more painful chapters in recent Oscar history. Michelle Yeoh, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Michelle Yeoh's win is, by most measures, the least controversial entry on this list, and yet it belongs here because no sweep of this size passes without friction. Yeoh became the first Asian woman and only the second woman of color in history to win Best Actress after Halle Berry. Her speech was one of the most celebrated moments of the ceremony.
For all the little boys and girls who look like me watching tonight, this is a beacon of hope and possibilities. And ladies, don't let anybody tell you you are ever past your prime.
That "past your prime" line was widely read as a direct response to CNN's Don Lemon, who had recently made controversial comments about women and age. Cate Blanchett partisans formed the primary opposition because Blanchett's performance in Tar carried a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes and was considered by many critics to be the more technically demanding and nuanced work. Blanchett won the BAFTA and the Venice Film Festival Award, while Yeoh took the Golden Globe, the SAG, and Critics' Choice. Some felt Yeoh benefited from the film's overall momentum, and Everything Everywhere All at Once won 7 of its 11 nominations that night, which led observers to describe a kind of sweep fatigue setting in among voters. Days before voting closed, Yeoh shared screenshots of a Vogue article stating that detractors would call Blanchett's the stronger performance, but that she already had 2 Oscars, which appeared to potentially violate Academy campaign rules prohibiting nominees from singling out the competition. Yeoh deleted the post, and the Academy investigated but took no action. A separate controversy dominated pre-ceremony discourse when Andrea Riseborough's surprise nomination for To Leslie, a film that grossed just $27,000, was propelled by a celebrity social media campaign from Gwyneth Paltrow, Edward Norton, Amy Adams, and others. Many observers noted this potentially displaced Viola Davis and Danielle Deadwyler from the ballot, raising racial equity concerns that ran parallel to Yeoh's win. Reese Witherspoon, Walk the Line. Reese Witherspoon's Best Actress win for Walk the Line arrived at the peak of what critics had begun calling biopic fatigue, 1 year after Jamie Foxx won for playing Ray Charles, and the sentiment in some corners of the industry was that the Academy had developed a troubling habit of rewarding playing a famous person and doing their voice over genuine depth of craft. Critic Nick Davis wrote that Witherspoon wears her wigs like they're wigs, holds her props like they're props, and wears her costumes like they're costumes. The key snub was Felicity Huffman for Transamerica. Huffman's portrayal of a preoperative transgender woman drew comparisons to Hilary Swank in Boys Don't Cry and Dustin Hoffman in Tootsie, and she won the Golden Globe for Drama, the National Board of Review, and the Independent Spirit Award. The Hartford Courant put it directly: how did a performance so transformative not win the Oscar? Reese Witherspoon, who won, is very good in Walk the Line, but not in Huffman's chameleon-like way. The other nominees were Judi Dench, Keira Knightley, and Charlize Theron. The anti-LGBTQ bias theory was impossible to ignore in context, because this was the year of the infamous crash upset over Brokeback Mountain for Best Picture, a result widely attributed to bias among older Academy voters. Tony Curtis and Ernest Borgnine openly stated they refused to watch Brokeback Mountain because of its content, and Transamerica's transgender subject matter may have suffered from the same prejudice. What gives the Witherspoon win a more complicated texture is her own account of making the film. She did not know she would have to sing when she signed on, director James Mangold having, in her own words, hoodwinked her, and she tried repeatedly to quit. Every day I wanted to quit. Every day I got pain in my stomach thinking I'm going to be terrible. Both she and Joaquin Phoenix did all their own singing and learned their instruments for the production. Whatever the merit arguments, the commitment was genuine. Sandra Bullock, The Blind Side. Sandra Bullock made Oscar history on the most unusual possible weekend. On Saturday, March 6, 2010, she won the Razzie Award for Worst Actress for All About Steve, accepting in person with Team Bullock t-shirts and a red wagon full of DVDs, challenging the voters in the room. If you had seen the film, seen it, with your eyes. On Sunday, March 7th, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress for The Blind Side, becoming the first person in history to win both awards in the same weekend. The performance controversy was real at the time. Carey Mulligan for An Education was the critics' darling, and Gabourey Sidibe for Precious had delivered a raw and powerful debut. Bullock swept every precursor, the Golden Globe, the SAG, and Critics' Choice, in a tie with Meryl Streep, making the win technically inevitable. She opened her speech with,
Did I really earn this, or did I just wear you all down?
The white savior criticism is what permanently marked this win. The Blind Side became the defining example of a Hollywood narrative pattern in which, as sociology professor Matthew Huggie told NBC News, the black person being saved has to be almost rescued from blackness itself. The message is, the closer to whiteness you become, the more your problems are solved. The film held only 66% on Rotten Tomatoes. None of that proved as damaging as what happened in 2023. When Michael Oher filed a lawsuit alleging the Toohey family had never actually adopted him, but instead tricked him into signing a conservatorship while profiting from his life story. The allegations reframed the film's entire feel-good premise. Calls emerged for Bullock to return her Oscar, and co-star Quentin Aaron defended her. She was an actress who got hired to do a job, and she did it so well that she was rewarded for it. The film's underlying story, however, may never recover its original reputation. Tommy Lee Jones, The Fugitive. Tommy Lee Jones's Best Supporting Actor win for The Fugitive is a case study in how the makeup Oscar mechanism creates new injustices in the act of correcting old ones. Jones was widely seen as the "do" veteran by 1994, having lost to Jack Palance for City Slickers just 2 years earlier in the exact same category, and the career recognition vote coalesced around him accordingly. The man who paid the price was Ralph Fiennes. Fiennes' portrayal of Nazi commander Eamon Goeth in Schindler's List is consistently cited as one of the greatest villain performances in the history of cinema, and Collider wrote that, when looking back, removed from any awards season machinations, Ralph Fiennes' work feels far more dynamic, far more penetrating, far more dangerous in its proximity to an uncomfortable truth. Jones's Marshall Gerard, entertaining and scene-stealing as it is, also raises the category fraud question, given that the character functions as the co-lead of The Fugitive alongside Harrison Ford, with his own complete arc and roughly equal screen time. What emerged in 2025 made it worse. Variety reported that 2 separate Oscar voters admitted they had not voted for Fiennes because they mistakenly believed he had already won for Schindler's List, and one voter's response upon learning the truth was, "Oh Fiennes has never won a competitive Oscar." The complete nominee list also included a 19-year-old Leonardo DiCaprio for What's Eating Gilbert Grape, who would wait until 2016 to finally win, along with Pete Postlethwaite and John Malkovich. Schindler's List won 7 Oscars that night, including Best Picture and Best Director, and yet its actors were entirely shut out. Liam Neeson also lost Best Actor that same evening. The leading speculation was that voters felt uncomfortable rewarding the portrayal of evil, or that they spread the awards around to prevent a total Schindler's sweep, and either way, Fiennes paid for it. Will Smith, King Richard. Will Smith had been building toward an Oscar for 20 years. He had received nominations for Ali and for The Pursuit of Happiness, and come away empty both times, and King Richard was his coronation moment. He had swept the Golden Globe, BAFTA, Critics' Choice, and SAG. Some critics preferred Benedict Cumberbatch for The Power of the Dog or Andrew Garfield for Tick, Tick, Boom. But this was Smith's night, and then he walked to the stage and changed Oscar history forever. Chris Rock made an unscripted joke about Jada Pinkett Smith's shaved head because she has alopecia, comparing her appearance to G.I. Jane. Smith initially appeared to laugh, then stood up, walked onto the stage, and slapped Rock across the face on live television.
Oh, wow!
Returning to his seat, he shouted twice,
"Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth!"
Rock recovered and told the room,
Oh, wow! Wow! Will Smith just smacked the shit out of me.
Less than 30 minutes later, Smith won Best Actor. During the commercial break, Denzel Washington had pulled him aside, and Smith quoted Washington in his speech. "At your highest moment, that's when the devil comes for you."
Highest moment, be careful, that's when the devil comes for you.
His speech included,
"I look like the crazy father, just like they said." I look like crazy father, just like they said about Richard Williams. But love will make you do crazy things.
He apologized to the Academy and fellow nominees, but not to Chris Rock. His son Jaden posted online, "And that's how we do it. The collateral damage was complete. Coda won Best Picture. Jessica Chastain won Best Actress, with a powerful speech about LGBTQ rights. Troy Kotsur made history as the first deaf man to win an acting Oscar. Jane Campion became the third woman to win Best Director." Every single one of those moments was eclipsed. Smith resigned his Academy membership and received a 10-year ban from all Academy events. A photo of the slap was eventually integrated into a mural on the Berlin Wall. Zoe Saldana, Emilia Perez. Emilia Perez was the most controversial film to dominate an Oscar ceremony in recent memory, and Zoe Saldana's win for Best Supporting Actress brought every one of those controversies to a single, electric point. The film, a French-directed Spanish-language crime musical about a Mexican drug cartel boss who undergoes gender-affirming surgery, earned 13 nominations, the most of any film that year and the most ever for a non-English language film. It won only 2, tying as the biggest Oscar loser in history alongside The Color Purple and The Turning Point. Attacks arrived from virtually every direction. Critics in Mexico called the film reductive, portraying the country solely as a violence-ridden, narcotics-ruled nation. GLAAD stated it was not good transgender representation, and a viral scene in which Saldana's character sings with a surgeon about surgery drew widespread ridicule. The film was directed by Frenchman Jacques Audiard, with primarily non-Mexican leads. Carla Sofia Gascon is Spanish, Saldana is Dominican-American, and Selena Gomez is Mexican-Italian-American. Only one supporting player in the cast was actually from Mexico. Then, Carla Sofia Gascon, who had made history as the first openly transgender Oscar nominee, had resurfaced social media posts exposed, including a statement about George Floyd, Islamophobic content, and a complaint that the Oscars looked like an Afro-Korean festival. Audiard called the posts inexcusable. Saldana swept every precursor and won over Monica Barbaro, Ariana Grande, Felicity Jones, and Isabella Rossellini. After the ceremony, Mexican journalist Cristina Ibanez told Saldana directly that the film had been hurtful to Mexicans, and Saldana responded, "I don't share your opinion. For me, the heart of this movie was not Mexico. The backlash was immediate." The night's actual winner was Anora, which took Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, and Best Original Screenplay, a reminder that the Oscar conversation and the cultural conversation are sometimes running in entirely opposite directions. If you liked this analysis, you'll love where I go next. Click the video on your screen and find out.